The morning sun cast long shadows across the halls of Clarence House as Queen Camilla prepared for what she thought would be an ordinary Tuesday. She had no idea that within hours her most carefully guarded secret would be discovered by the very people sworn to protect her. Royal Guard Captain James Morrison had served the crown for 15 years, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. It began when the Queen Consort requested that her private study be thoroughly cleaned and reorganized. The renovation team had been working for 3 days, moving furniture and examining every corner of the room that had remained untouched for months. Camilla watched nervously from the doorway as workers moved her antique desk away from the wall. She had specifically chosen this particular desk years ago, not for its beauty but for what it concealed. Behind it, hidden beneath layers of wallpaper and paint, was something she had hoped would never be found. The Queen Consort had always been meticulous about her privacy. Even her closest staff members knew there were certain areas of her life that remained off-limits. But today, as she watched the renovation unfold, she felt a growing sense of unease that she couldn't shake. Captain Morrison noticed her unusual behavior immediately. In all his years of service, he had rarely seen the Queen Consort appear so anxious during such routine activities. She kept glancing at her watch and making excuses to check on the progress of the work. Something was clearly troubling her, but protocol prevented him from asking direct questions. The breakthrough came when one of the renovation workers, a man named David Chen, noticed something unusual about the wall behind the desk. The surface felt different from the rest of the room, and when he tapped it lightly, it produced a hollow sound that suggested there was empty space behind it. David called over his supervisor, who examined the wall more carefully. They discovered what appeared to be the outline of a small door, so cleverly concealed that it had gone unnoticed for years. The paint and wallpaper had been applied in such a way that the edges were nearly invisible to the casual observer. When Captain Morrison was informed of the discovery, he immediately understood the delicate nature of the situation. Any hidden compartment in a royal residence was a matter of security, regardless of how innocent it might appear. He approached Queen Camilla with the respect and discretion that his position demanded. The Queen Consort's face went pale when she learned what had been found. She had hoped this day would never come, but she also knew that she could not prevent the security team from investigating further. The safety protocols were clear, and even she was not above them. Captain Morrison explained that they would need to open the hidden compartment to ensure there were no security risks. Queen Camilla nodded slowly, understanding that she had no choice in the matter. Her hands trembled slightly as she realized that her most precious secret was about to be revealed. As the renovation team carefully removed the concealing materials, a small but sophisticated safe became visible. It was clearly old but well maintained, with intricate metalwork that suggested it had been installed many years ago. The combination lock gleamed despite its age, indicating that it had been regularly maintained and used. The Queen Consort stood in silence as Captain Morrison examined the safe. She knew that within minutes everything would change. The contents of that safe represented not just material treasures, but memories and connections to a past that she had never fully shared with anyone. Captain Morrison turned to face her with a mixture of curiosity and professional concern. The discovery of any hidden safe in a royal residence required immediate investigation, but he could see the emotional weight this moment carried for the Queen Consort. He would proceed with the sensitivity that the situation demanded, but he would also fulfill his duty to ensure the security of the royal household. The tension in the room was thick as Captain Morrison examined the safe more closely. Queen Camilla stood nearby, her usual composure cracking under the weight of the moment. She had carried this secret for so long that she had almost convinced herself it would never be discovered. The safe was clearly expensive and sophisticated, installed by professionals who understood the importance of both security and discretion. Captain Morrison noted the quality of the workmanship and realized that this was not something that had been hastily hidden. This was a deliberate and carefully planned concealment that had taken considerable effort and resources. David Chen, the renovation worker who had made the initial discovery, stepped back respectfully as the security team took over. He had worked on many high-profile properties, but he had never been involved in uncovering royal secrets. The gravity of the situation was not lost on him, and he understood that discretion would be essential going forward. Queen Camilla finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. She explained that the safe had been installed years ago, long before she had become queen consort.
She had used it to store items that were precious to her personally.
Things that she felt needed extra protection beyond what normal security measures could provide. Captain Morrison listened carefully to her explanation, but his training told him that he needed to see the contents for himself. Security protocols were clear about hidden compartments and safes in royal residences. Even if the queen consort herself had installed it, the contents needed to be verified to ensure there were no security risks to the royal family. The queen consort understood the necessity of the situation, but she also felt a deep sadness about losing control over something so personal. She had always valued her privacy, and this safe represented one of the last truly private spaces in her very public life. Now even that sanctuary was about to be invaded. As Captain Morrison prepared to open the safe, Queen Camilla made an unexpected request. She asked if the number of people present could be limited to just the essential security personnel. The renovation workers were asked to step outside while she provided the combination to the safe herself. With trembling fingers, she began to turn the dial. The numbers came to her easily despite her emotional state. She had opened this safe countless times over the years, always in private, always in moments when she needed to connect with memories that meant everything to her. Each turn of the dial felt like she was giving away a piece of herself. The mechanism clicked softly as the final number fell into place. Queen Camilla stepped back as Captain Morrison carefully opened the heavy door. The interior of the safe was lined with velvet, and even in the dim light they could see that it contained several items wrapped in silk cloth. Captain Morrison reached in carefully and removed the first item. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and as he unwrapped the silk, everyone in the room gasped audibly. In his hands was a tiara of extraordinary beauty, set with diamonds and sapphires that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. But this was not just any tiara. Captain Morrison recognized it immediately from his extensive training in royal jewelry and artifacts. This was a piece that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, but it was one that had not been seen in public for many years. The craftsmanship was unmistakable, and the historical significance was enormous. Queen Camilla watched as recognition dawned on Captain Morrison's face. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped it would be on her own terms. Now she would have to explain not just what these items were, but how they had come to be in her possession. The captain carefully set the tiara on a nearby table and reached back into the safe. There were more items wrapped in silk, and each one promised to be as significant as the first. The safe was deeper than it had appeared from the outside, and it was clear that Queen Camilla had been using it to store a substantial collection of valuable items. As more items were revealed, Captain Morrison realized that he was looking at what appeared to be a private collection of royal jewelry that had somehow found its way into Queen Camilla's personal possession. The implications were staggering, and he knew that this discovery would require immediate attention from the highest levels of royal security. The second item Captain Morrison removed from the safe was even more stunning than the first. Wrapped in cream-colored silk was a necklace of such extraordinary beauty that it seemed to glow with its own inner light. The centerpiece was a massive emerald surrounded by perfectly matched diamonds, each one flawless and brilliant. Queen Camilla closed her eyes as she saw the necklace again. She had not looked at these treasures for months, keeping them locked away not just for security, but because seeing them brought back memories that were both precious and painful. Each piece told a story that connected her to Queen Elizabeth II in ways that the public had never known. Captain Morrison handled each item with the reverence it deserved, but his mind was racing with questions. These were clearly pieces from the royal collection, but they were items that were not currently listed in the official royal jewelry inventory. How had they come to be in Queen Camilla's private safe, and why had their location been kept secret? The third item was a bracelet that sparkled with such intensity that it seemed almost magical. The diamonds were arranged in an intricate pattern that created the illusion of movement even when the bracelet was perfectly still. Captain Morrison could see that this was not just expensive jewelry, but pieces that had been crafted by master artisans at the height of their skill. Queen Camilla finally found her voice and began to explain. She told Captain Morrison that these items had been given to her personally by Queen Elizabeth II during the final months of the late Queen's life. They had been gifts meant to remain private, tokens of affection and respect that were separate from the official royal jewelry collection. The story she told was both touching and complex. During Queen Elizabeth's final year, she had spent many private hours with Queen Camilla, sharing stories about the jewelry collection and explaining the history behind many of the pieces. The late queen had wanted to ensure that certain items would be preserved and cherished by someone who truly understood their significance. According to Queen Camilla, these particular pieces had special meaning to Queen Elizabeth because they had been gifts from King Philip during their courtship and early marriage. They represented some of the most personal and romantic moments in the late queen's life, and she had wanted them to be cared for by someone who would appreciate their emotional value as much as their material worth. Captain Morrison listened carefully to this explanation, but he also knew that he would need to verify these claims through official channels. The provenance of royal jewelry was meticulously documented, and any transfers or gifts would need to be confirmed through proper records and witnesses. As he continued to remove items from the safe, the collection grew even more impressive. There was a pair of earrings that featured pearls so perfect they seemed to have been created by nature, specifically for royalty. Each pearl was flawlessly round and had a luster that suggested they had been carefully maintained and treasured for many years. The fifth item was perhaps the most surprising of all. It was a small jewelry box, intricately carved from what appeared to be ivory and inlaid with gold. When Captain Morrison opened it carefully, he found a collection of rings, each one set with precious stones that reflected the light in dazzling patterns. Queen Camilla explained that the jewelry box itself had been a wedding gift to Queen Elizabeth from her grandmother, Queen Mary. It had been used to store the Queen's most personal jewelry, pieces that she wore only in private or for the most intimate family occasions. The fact that it had been given to Queen Camilla suggested a level of trust and affection that went far beyond normal royal protocol. But there were still more items in the safe. Captain Morrison could see that the collection was extensive, and that each piece was likely worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. The responsibility of securing and cataloging these treasures was enormous, and he knew that this discovery would require immediate attention from palace officials. As he reached for the next item, Captain Morrison noticed that Queen Camilla had tears in her eyes. These were not just valuable objects to her, but connections to a woman she had grown to love and respect deeply. The late Queen Elizabeth had trusted her with these treasures, and now that trust was being examined and questioned by others, the emotional weight of the moment was not lost on anyone in the room. This was not just about valuable jewelry or security protocols, but about the personal relationships and private moments that had existed between two women who had shared one of the most unique positions in the world. The sixth item Captain Morrison retrieved was unlike anything he had seen before. It was a brooch in the shape of a butterfly, but the craftsmanship was so extraordinary that it seemed ready to take flight. The wings were created from hundreds of tiny diamonds arranged in a pattern that mimicked the delicate veining of real butterfly wings, while the body was formed from a single flawless ruby that glowed like a tiny flame. Queen Camilla's breath caught when she saw the butterfly brooch again. This piece held the deepest personal significance of all the items in the safe. Queen Elizabeth had worn it on the day she first welcomed Camilla into the royal family, and it had become a symbol of acceptance and belonging that meant more to her than any crown or title ever could. As Captain Morrison continued his careful inventory, he discovered that the safe contained not just jewelry, but also several small leather-bound books. These appeared to be personal journals or diaries, written in Queen Elizabeth's distinctive handwriting. The presence of these documents added an entirely new dimension to the discovery, suggesting that the late queen had entrusted Camilla with her most private thoughts and memories. The journals were carefully wrapped in protective cloth, indicating that they had been preserved with great care and attention. Captain Morrison realized that these documents could contain information of enormous historical importance, providing insights into the late Queen's private thoughts during some of the most significant moments in modern British history. Queen Camilla explained that the journals had been given to her during Queen Elizabeth's final weeks, when the late Queen had become increasingly concerned about preserving her personal legacy. She had wanted to ensure that future generations would understand not just her public duties, but also her private struggles, joys, and reflections on a lifetime of service to the crown. The emotional intensity of these revelations was overwhelming for everyone present. Captain Morrison had expected to find valuable jewelry, but instead he had uncovered what appeared to be one of the most significant private archives in royal history. The responsibility of protecting and preserving these materials was enormous, and he knew that decisions about their future would need to be made at the highest levels of government. As he reached deeper into the safe, Captain Morrison found several small velvet pouches that contained loose gemstones of extraordinary quality. There were diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, and rubies, each one carefully selected and preserved. Queen Camilla explained that these had been stones that Queen Elizabeth had collected over many years, often receiving them as gifts from foreign dignitaries or discovering them in antique jewelry that was being restored. The late queen had planned to have these stones set into new pieces of jewelry that would eventually become part of the royal collection, but her declining health had prevented her from completing these projects. She had given them to Queen Camilla with the hope that they would eventually be transformed into beautiful pieces that would honor both their history and their future. Among the final items in the safe were several photographs in silver frames. These were not official royal portraits, but candid family pictures that showed Queen Elizabeth in relaxed private moments with her loved ones. Some showed her with Prince Philip during their early years together, while others captured precious moments with her children and grandchildren. Queen Camilla treasured these photographs because they showed a side of Queen Elizabeth that the public rarely saw. Behind the formal crown and ceremonial robes was a woman who had experienced the same joys and sorrows as any other person, who had loved deeply and grieved profoundly, and who had found moments of happiness and laughter, even amid the enormous pressures of her royal duties. Captain Morrison carefully examined each photograph, noting the genuine affection and warmth that was visible in Queen Elizabeth's expressions. These were clearly precious family memories that had been entrusted to Queen Camilla as a gesture of the deepest personal trust and affection. As he completed his inventory of the safe's contents, Captain Morrison realized that he had discovered something far more significant than a simple collection of valuable jewelry. This was a treasure trove of royal history, personal memories, and private documents that provided unprecedented insight into the life and thoughts of one of the most important figures in modern history. The weight of responsibility he now carried was enormous. These items would need to be properly secured, authenticated, and preserved for future generations. But more importantly, he would need to ensure that the personal trust Queen Elizabeth had placed in Queen Camilla was respected and honored throughout whatever processes would follow. Queen Camilla stood quietly as Captain Morrison finished his examination of the safe's contents. She had known this moment would eventually come, but she had hoped it would be under different circumstances. Now she would need to trust that the same institutions that had protected the royal family for centuries would also protect the private legacy that Queen Elizabeth had entrusted to her care. The aftermath of the discovery sent ripples throughout the highest levels of the royal household. Captain Morrison immediately contacted his superiors, knowing that a find of this magnitude required careful handling and absolute discretion. Within hours, senior palace officials, royal historians, and jewelry experts had been quietly summoned to examine the contents of Queen Camilla's secret safe. The first expert to arrive was Dr. Margaret Thornfield, the royal family's chief jewelry historian and authenticator. She had spent her entire career studying and cataloging royal treasures, but even she was unprepared for what she found spread carefully across the tables in Queen Camilla's study. Each piece was more magnificent than the last, and the historical significance was immediately apparent to her trained eye. Dr. Thornfield's initial examination confirmed Queen Camilla's account of the jewelry's origins. The craftsmanship, materials, and design elements all matched perfectly with other pieces that had been gifts from Prince Philip to Queen Elizabeth during their courtship and early marriage. The provenance was clear, and the emotional significance of these pieces would have made them incredibly precious to the late Queen. Meanwhile, Royal Archivist Professor James Hartwell was carefully examining the leather-bound journals that had been found in the safe. His initial assessment suggested that they contained Queen Elizabeth's private reflections on some of the most significant events of her reign, written in her own hand and never intended for public consumption. The historical value of these documents was immeasurable, As word of the discovery spread through the appropriate channels, it became clear that this was not a scandal or security breach, but rather the revelation of an extraordinary act of personal trust between two remarkable women. Queen Elizabeth had clearly planned this bequest carefully, ensuring that her most precious personal treasures would be preserved by someone who would truly understand their significance. King Charles III was informed of the discovery within hours, and his response surprised many of the officials involved. Rather than concern or suspicion, he expressed deep gratitude that his mother had found someone she trusted enough to preserve such important family treasures. He understood that these items represented not just material wealth, but the emotional legacy of his parents' love story. The authentication process continued for several days, with experts arriving from museums, auction houses, and universities to examine various aspects of the collection. Each authentication confirmed what was already becoming clear: this was a legitimate and extraordinarily valuable collection of royal jewelry and personal artifacts that had been lawfully given to Queen Camilla by Queen Elizabeth herself. During this process, Queen Camilla provided additional details about the circumstances under which she had received these treasures. She described private conversations with Queen Elizabeth during the final months of her life, when the late Queen had become increasingly focused on ensuring that her personal legacy would be properly preserved and understood by future generations. According to Queen Camilla's account, Queen Elizabeth had been particularly concerned that these intimate pieces of jewelry, which represented some of the happiest moments of her personal life, might be lost or forgotten among the vast official royal collection. She had wanted them to be cared for by someone who understood their emotional significance as much as their material value. The discovery also revealed the extent to which Queen Elizabeth had trusted Queen Camilla with her most private thoughts and memories. The journals contained reflections on major historical events, personal struggles with duty and family obligations, and intimate thoughts about her relationship with Prince Philip that had never been shared with anyone else. As the authentication process neared completion, it became clear that the collection was worth tens of millions of pounds, but its historical and emotional value was truly priceless. These were not just expensive pieces of jewelry, but artifacts that told the story of one of the most remarkable love stories in royal history, and provided unprecedented insight into the private thoughts of one of history's most significant figures. The final piece of authentication came when royal records keeper Eleanor Walsh discovered references to the jewelry in Queen Elizabeth's private papers. The late Queen had made careful notes about her intention to give these pieces to Queen Camilla, along with detailed explanations of their history and significance. These documents provided final confirmation that the bequest had been planned and intentional. As news of the authentication began to circulate among senior royal officials, there was a growing sense of amazement at the depth of trust and affection that Queen Elizabeth had shown toward Queen Camilla. The late Queen had entrusted her with not just valuable objects, but with the preservation of her most intimate memories and personal legacy. The question now became, what should be done with these extraordinary treasures? They clearly belonged to Queen Camilla as personal gifts, but their historical significance meant that decisions about their future would need to be made carefully and with consideration for their importance to the royal family and British history. 3 months after the discovery, Queen Camilla stood before a specially convened gathering of senior royal family members, palace officials, and historians. The authentication process had been completed, and decisions needed to be made about the future of Queen Elizabeth's extraordinary personal bequest. The room was filled with some of the most important figures in British royal history, but the atmosphere was one of respect and gratitude rather than controversy or concern. Everyone present understood that they were dealing with something far more significant than a simple collection of valuable jewelry. This was a testament to one of the most remarkable personal relationships in royal history. King Charles III spoke first, expressing his profound appreciation for the way Queen Camilla had preserved and protected his mother's most precious personal treasures. He acknowledged that the late Queen's decision to entrust these items to his wife demonstrated a level of trust and affection that honored both women and reflected the deep bonds that had developed between them during Queen Elizabeth's final years. The king announced that Queen Camilla would retain ownership of the jewelry collection, as had been Queen Elizabeth's clear intention. However, given the historical significance of the pieces, arrangements would be made to ensure that they could be studied, displayed, and appreciated by future generations while remaining in Queen Camilla's care. Dr. Thornfield presented her comprehensive authentication report, which had revealed several previously unknown details about the jewelry's history. Some pieces had been designed personally by Prince Philip as gifts for special occasions, while others had been passed down through royal family generations before being given to Queen Elizabeth. Each piece told a story that added depth and richness to the official royal history. Professor Hartwell's analysis of the journals had revealed them to be one of the most significant historical documents discovered in decades. Queen Elizabeth's private reflections provided insights into major world events, royal family decisions, and personal relationships that had previously been unknown to historians. The cultural and educational value of these documents was immense. The decision was made to create a special royal archive where the journals would be preserved and studied under Queen Camilla's supervision. Selected excerpts would eventually be made available to historians and researchers, but only in ways that respected Queen Elizabeth's privacy and the personal nature of her reflections. Queen Camilla spoke emotionally about the responsibility she felt to honor Queen Elizabeth's trust and preserve these treasures for future generations. She announced her intention to establish a special foundation that would ensure the proper care and study of the collection, while also supporting educational programs about royal history and the preservation of cultural artifacts. The butterfly brooch, which had held such special significance for both women, would be displayed in a place of honor at Clarence House, where it would serve as a permanent reminder of the extraordinary friendship between Queen Elizabeth and Queen Camilla. The other pieces would be carefully preserved and occasionally displayed for special exhibitions and educational purposes. The revelation of the secret safe and its contents ultimately became a story not of hidden scandal, but of remarkable trust, friendship, and the preservation of precious memories. The collection provided new insights into Queen Elizabeth's personal life and demonstrated the depth of her relationship with Queen Camilla in ways that strengthened, rather than challenged, the royal family's reputation. Captain Morrison, whose discovery had started this extraordinary chain of events, was commended for his professionalism and discretion throughout the process. His careful handling of the situation had ensured that these priceless treasures were revealed and preserved in a way that honored both their material value and their emotional significance. The story of the secret safe became a testament to the power of personal relationships and trust even within the formal structures of royal life. Queen Elizabeth's decision to entrust her most precious personal treasures to Queen Camilla had created a legacy that would continue to inspire and educate people for generations to come. As the official proceedings concluded, Queen Camilla returned to her private study, where the safe remained open but now empty. She reflected on the journey that had brought these treasures into her life, and the responsibility she now carried to preserve Queen Elizabeth's personal legacy. The secret was no longer secret, but the love and trust it represented would continue to honor the memory of one of history's most remarkable women. The discovery had transformed what could have been a moment of embarrassment into a celebration of friendship, trust, and the preservation of precious memories. Queen Elizabeth's final gift to Queen Camilla had become a gift to history itself, ensuring that future generations would understand not just the public life of a great monarch, but also the private heart of a remarkable woman who had touched the lives of everyone around her.